Well, looks like the bottom fell out. Guess it's time to do an 8/8 swap on this thing. Subframe's all stripped down. Got the old differential out and the old axle shafts. So I'll give you an idea of why this is such a big upgrade if you don't already know, which you probably do. So this is the Ford Exploder axle, and this is the stock RX7 axle. So you can see there's quite a big size difference there. This one's a little under an inch, and this one's like 1.25 inches or so. CV joints are a lot beefier. You can see that's a lot bigger than that. So that's one of the reasons. The other one is your differential itself. 8/8's a lot stronger, 31 spline axles. It's just better all around. So I'm going with the single front mount. There's also a double front mount, but if you have a double front mount one, you hit this thing, which you can modify this, that's no problem, but single works fine. So that's the plan. I gotta fixture this up. I took some measurements on where my axle's angle needs to be coming in relation to the frame itself. So I'm gonna get all this jigged up, make a bracket for this, and then we'll shorten these axles down. I need to take out about 2 inches or so. I'll be able to get a good measurement once I have this guy in place. This is obviously my mock-up one. I've got another one with all the guts inside of it, but no reason to lug that heavy one around when I can just move this little light guy around. I took some measurements from a couple reference points and compared them to this surface right here. So I've got this spaced up about where it sits in the car. Just got a little block under there. So you can definitely do this in the car, but I'm just going to do it outside the car because why not? So what I'm going to do is build a fixture that attaches over here, comes up, locates these 2 points here and here, and then I can locate the 8/8 and build this piece based off of my frame measurements. So here's what my basic fixturing looks like. So up here, I got these guys welded to my table and then welded to the subframe. So that locks this subframe down to the table. Won't go anywhere. Then off of the table, I've got these uprights coming, and I got this cross over here and another upright. So then this is going to be where my locating bolts attach. So this height is the only critical measurement I did. It's the same on this side to this side, and that's the height that I need. The rest of it, well, this is why you save all your scrap steel, because you can just throw it together for crap like this and it doesn't matter. So I'm ready to weld my plates on. So to locate my rear holes, I've got 1/2 inch bolts, and then I just made some little aluminum spacers that go from 1/2 inch to Japanese, because I don't have any Japanese bolts laying around. So that goes in there. That just goes up through there. Again, some random plates laying around, 1/2 inch hole. So now with those plates bolted on, I'm ready to weld this to this, and that'll give me my locating points. And then hopefully I can still get the diff out of here. Because whenever you're making a fixture like this, you got to think that you got to remove whatever it is you're placing, then you got to put your new one in. So hopefully that works. All right, everything's all tacked up, and it's rock solid, except for the camera shaking when I hit the table. So now we're going to see if I can pull this diff out, hopefully. And there we go. Out with the old, in with the new. So next step is I'll get this all centered left to right in the subframe so that my axles are equal length. And I'll figure out where I need to go with my height on this. And then once this is all centered up, start making our little bracket that's gonna mount the diff to the car. Just got back from a junkyard run, and here's what I picked up. So these are our Ford Explorer from independent rear suspension spindles. So by modifying the hub to put it in the spindle, I'm going to get the 31 splines that I need for the Explorer axle. The only sort of downside is going to convert it to a 5 lug, which isn't that big a deal. It just means I'll have 5 on the back, 4 in the front. So then I also picked up this rotor, which is off a Mustang. And Mustangs and Explorers use the same bolt pattern. So and the same center diameter and everything. So my plan is to use the Mustang rotor Explorer hub, and I also picked up some Mustang brake calipers. I picked up two different styles. These are kind of the smaller, they're both like mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006. I think this is called the GT one, and this is the normal one. This is also the rotor that came with the larger one. This one had a smaller rotor, so of course I want the bigger rotor. So I got all that. Then I also picked up two tires off of Mustang. So these are just stock Mustang rims, and tires hold air, they're not that great. Basically what this gives me is a pretty cheap 16-inch rim. So I can buy sets of these if I want multiple rear sets. So that's my plan for converting the hub portion over to the Explorer 31 spline. Here's what I picked up to make my bracket with. So these are just a universal 4-link. It's a 2-inch diameter tube. Well, I call it a tube. It's been bored out. It's 3 inches long. They happen to have a Zerk fitting. I really don't care about that, but this is what I got. They came with some poly bushings. Then they came with a sleeve that slides through the bushings. So this will be the mount for the ends of my bracket that I'm going to locate right there. But these are only available in American, so this is an American diameter inside here. So I need to bore this out to the Japanese diameter. So you know those videos where they've got like the perfectly clean machine shop that they actually never do anything with, but I guess make videos? Yeah, this isn't one of them. Alright, so I'll just do that about 10 more times until I get to the diameter I need, and then these will be ready. Alright, so I've checked my clearances, and I've got this about centered up to where I've got clearance for when my pinion is in there. And on the back here, I've got my diff centered, so the distance from here to where the axle goes in is the same on both sides. Got my two little end links bolted on right there and there. I stuck the Zerk fittings outward, that way it'll confuse somebody. Like if they ever buy this car from me, they'll be like, why is there Zerk fittings on here? Then they'll grease them for no reason. So when I connect these, I'm going to come, there's a sway bar in the car that runs right along here, dips down, comes along. So my plan is to come over and then past that dip, I'm going to come back this way, put a bar across here, and then go back over to this one. Then I'll put some 1/4-inch plate or 3/16 plate or whatever I can find as my vertical going down to these holes. But I'm not going to drill these holes. I'll put the whole assembly back in the car so I can set my pinion angle and then drill the holes where they need to be. So now I just get to play a game of connect the dots between there and there and there and there. So after some measuring and chopping, here's what I've got. So I've got my main back brace, we'll call it here. And I just cut it with the 2-inch hole saw on either end. That way it fits pretty good up against the tube. The diff needs to come up higher, so I've got to cut this section out. So first I'm going to weld this little piece on. It's just some 3/16 plate. Put a couple bends in it. So I center lined it up with there. Alright, so here we are with our first test fit. Got everything tacked together. So my clearance is pretty good for my top brace. It's hitting the stock fuel lines, but I'm not using those anyways, so I just need to cut those out. That's no problem. So this is the sway bar I was talking about. You can see it kind of sits right behind the bar and down a little bit. So I think what my plan is going to be is to come off at about a 45-degree angle right here. So I'll be coming off this way, below this bar. It does articulate just a little bit, so I'll just figure out that radius and I'll dodge the whole thing. So I need a spot for this front mount to go. So I'm going to put it right here. It's been done before. It's a proven process. So, cardboard, metal, tacked in place, drilled, and bolted. So now that I got that pivot point set, I'm going to realign this. Now I can adjust the height. I cut out my cross support. All right, we're finally starting to look like something. I went ahead and finish welded these two welds out there and there. Cut out that center section, it's right there. So now I've got plenty of clearance. Got all this centered up. Got it raised up on my block. I've got my pieces cut. They're going to come off like this. I'll show you some of the measurements I've been using. It's a lot of back and forth, so I didn't want to show every step. Basically, I'm using that little crotch right there where the control arm sits. It's about equal on both sides as far as I can tell. So I've been going from in there, bottoming out the tape measure, then measuring back to here. Then I come to the other side, put it in that same point, and measure back to here. That's how I've been centering it straight front and back. Because if that number is off at all, that means you're tilted. And the other measurement I've been using is going from that flange there to this flange here, making sure that's equal on both sides of the diff. So that's how I've been centering it all up. And then since everything is welded to the table right now with those little blue scraps over there, I can also measure this, the height to my hole. It's about 7 3/4 and 7 3/4. So every time I've been doing a weld or a cut or a step, I've been checking those 6 measurements over and over and over. It gets kind of boring, but you get the idea. So now I'll tear all this apart and we'll throw this in the car. All right, so here's the angle of the tail shaft on my transmission. It is at 5 degrees down. See, I've got that stuck on there. So now I can match the angle on the differential. So here's the current angle on the differential. Now, before I started any of this, I found out that these machine surfaces right here, this surface, is 90 degrees square to the pinion, so I can go off of this back edge. It's just a lot easier for access. So I need to go up about 5 degrees. So I'll just raise my jack up a little bit. So now we are right at about 5 degrees. So now what I'm going to do is take my measurements. I'm going to square my diff up left to right, correct angle, everything like that, just like I was doing on the table. And then I will make my little gussets that come down and the flat plate that goes across the back for it to bolt to. All right, so I added on my downrights, there and there. Added a strip across the back, lined up my holes. So the diff is hanging now, all by itself. Everything is squared up. So now I get to pull all this back out, and then I'll make this thing so it can handle the torque, because right now it'll just twist like a little pretzel. All right, I pulled the bracket out of the car. This is the part most people won't show you. This is the extremely ugly stage of prototyping. So anytime you're prototyping something, there's always a point that it just looks ugly. This is it right here. See, I got like extra stuff hanging off down here. Some of my stuff's not quite symmetrical. There's like a 1/4 inch lip there, probably about a 3/8 inch lip there, which means these aren't at the same angle. Little things like that. But now I've got my basic structure that I can work off of outside of the car. So again, I can weld this down to my table, make a jig for these holes, and I can start making this thing look actually pretty. So now I've used my bracket that's tacked together to rejig my jig. So I took the plates that I'd used, welded them to the table, just reused those same brackets, welded them, drilled 2 holes. So now I have my 4 points there, 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 and there, and those are my critical points. So now I can cut these off and I can make something pretty looking with all of this, because it's hard to do under the car, but easy to do up here on the workbench. And here we are all welded up. Pulled all my bushings out, didn't want to melt them. So I got all these welded in. I ended up switching these brackets out. I found some thicker steel, went ahead and used that instead, a little bit stronger. Put a second plate across here, welded the whole seam, so beefed it up. It's all 3/8 across here now. Notch these the same way. Then I just took a piece of DOM tubing. You can see a slit right there. I just cut it right down the middle, chopped this off. That gave me 2 half circle sections. Welded those guys down in there, so that way it's all boxed in. So now I'm ready for what should be my final test fit. I'm probably going to add some kind of a brace maybe right here, but I need to get this in the car and make sure there's clearance for that and everything. But it's pretty strong as is. It's pretty heavy too, so I think it'll actually hold up just like it is, but I'd still like to gusset this in somehow. So this is all 1/4 inch thick wall and 1/4 inch DOM tubing, so it's pretty beefy. All right, we're back under the car. Got my bracket installed, got the diff installed. Everything lines up pretty good. I will be able to add a little gusset from this section to here. Got plenty of space for that. You can see why I had to notch for the anti-sway bar. So now there's space for it to, it doesn't articulate much, but just a little bit, so that way I'm not going to have any issues there. So the notch lines up pretty good on both sides. I still haven't been to the junkyard to get 2 bolts for these, but I'll need to get the right thread one, but just holding it in there temporary for now. Everything lines up. pinion angles correct. So now I get to pull everything back out of the car, and then we'll continue on. I'm going to pull the subframe back out, pull everything back out, and next step will probably be to do the hubs. And then after the hubs are done, then I can get my good measurement for my axles, and then we'll make the axles for that. So that's the first step to mounting a independent rear suspension in a car, and you can do this for any kind of car. It doesn't have to be one that already has independent rear suspension. It can be a solid axle. You can be converting it like an S10, convert it over to an 8.8 IRS just like this. You just start making custom brackets and you go from there.